I like how Rose emphasized that it's the accessibility in all environments, right? And that's part of the normalization of it, that it just becomes normally a part of that student wherever they need it, right? So that it's available and they can access it in all environments. And in particular, I want to go back to a couple of times I mentioned it early, and then Rose touched on it again. Is that consideration piece for when something's universal, like let's say your school district or your school building um, does a couple things universally, like you have some of the accessibility features available. Let's take text to speech for all students all the time, right? And you have that available. So then do you need to put it in the IEP because it's there for everybody? It's a general ed thing in your world, right? Yes, because if that's, well, the answer is it depends, right? If it's that student's disability related need, that they need it due to a disability related need, then yes, you absolutely should include it in an IEP. Because remember what I said before, it's only universal in some environments. We are not universal across all environments yet with the work. We're moving towards being more universal, but we definitely have to put it in a student's IEP who needs it, right? Because now we have a legal binding requirement to make sure it's provided. And this information update bulletin 22.02 on assistive technology, that link there on the slide, there's one of the questions there does answer that for you if you need to look at that guidance from DPI directly. So going back to the considerations, so that word considerations and the circumstances for when and how a assistive technology may be needed needs to be considered ongoing. So normalizing it again would be an ongoing process in your pre-planning of lessons, what needs to be available, and are we making sure it's up and ready for that student during that time? Do we need to update AAC devices with content that's coming in a new lesson or a new unit in science or social studies or whatever course that student may be in? But the considerations are always linked back to disability related needs overall, and kind of how Rose just shared how throughout that IEP, those disability related needs are being documented, and then they're available daily. And when we say daily, I'm not saying that's what you put in the necessarily in the frequency and amount, might be, but what you want to do is consider where daily and what are the circumstances that the student would need that assistive technology, because sometimes it varies, right? So you have to think about the right match of that tool and how and when it's going to be used, and should be matched to instruction. We should be using the accessibility features, normalizing it right throughout the student's day and school life, so that when we come to an assessment, it's not a new tool to be used. When I think about circumstances, I think about, well, writing is maybe speech to text is the circumstances might be when writing is more than 2 or 3 sentences, because the disability related need is that the student's motor skills are, affected in a way that they would tire too easily to have to write all that. So you can dip into the tool of speech to text, right? So that the student doesn't have to write long essays without that tool. There are many other examples. But then going on to, I moved on to the consideration slide there, Rose. So
I was
yeah,
wondering
and
about
match
that.
to instruction. Yeah,
You're going deep.
I'm going deep. Okay, so the next slide where we talk about assessment accessibility.
Sure.
Let's go there. Yeah. Well, yeah. So there are a lot of universal tools, right? And designated supports, and we have accessibility guides. that put all that out, because that's the design of that assessment vendor. That's not telling you you can't do it for a particular student in one way or another. The whole piece of that is just to inform you of how that particular assessment is designed and what it needs to get your students what they need. So you need to help it. Like some are automatically turned on, the universal tools are there. The designated supports, the teacher may have to make sure are available, or the proctor of the assessment. But overall, the accommodations and the unique circumstances for which they should be used should be available to the student regardless of how the vendor sets that up. We have to do a little background sometimes in figuring some of that out. And there are some caveats on assessments that, like the Forward right now, we have speech to text or text to speech as a universal feature. However, if it's in a student's IEP, right, that they need that, then we should be making sure the proctor of that assessment should be making sure that the student knows how to access it and get it working on their computer before they ever start the assessment, so they're not stressed at trying to figure stuff out. Yeah, we work with assessment vendors on making these things more universal, but also more in a style and a way that students are used to. But then we have those unique circumstances that certain students use things a certain way, that no matter how many times we work with a vendor to make that universal or make it supportive, we still have to add a couple things or practice with it in order to make it work for a student. That's just the reality we're in right now. So accommodations for assessments on the next slide. You consider these things necessary to measure academic achievement. We cannot measure their achievement unless we have these accommodations in place. We cannot effectively know what our students know and are able to do when we remove those accommodations, right, or don't provide them. So we want to make sure that they have them. I like to give the example sometimes of I think of the gym class, right? And one of their strengths, or one of their goals are for not strength, but whatever, running, right? So they have to do the pacer. So the system or the activity they're doing is the pacer. But now you have a student in a wheelchair, you're going to evaluate that they're able to get from A to B with a certain speed by using the pacer. So you have to change up that tool. The accommodation is the wheelchair, but you don't want to use that form of measuring, right, their ability, because it doesn't make any sense. So there has to be some certain unique considerations for some of our kids, and that is okay. That's why you have an IEP. You want to be consistent with your day-to-day instructional methods too, that you're using them, and that all teachers and everyone, right, is working collectively and understands together. And I liked how Rose shared, we don't utilize those program modifications for training our staff and how to use the tools enough. So I think that could be something that you might consider, adding a little extra training time on some students' IEPs. And we never ever want to introduce a new feature the first time when they're taking a high stakes assessment, right? Practice that. There are opportunities to practice with the Forward. There are opportunities to practice items with the ACT. And so you want to be able to do those. And just for your information, on the next slide, I have listed the assessment in Wisconsin's webpage. And I also wanted to share with you 2 tools and resources. So the assessment FAQ is really nice. It does answer a lot of questions that you might have, but there's also that assessment accommodations form there, that when something isn't quite right, or you need a little different, unique situation with the Forward exam, or the ACT, you're welcome to fill out that form and submit it to DPI, and DPI will put a small team of folks together to help problem solve and maybe meet with you all to figure out the right features that might help that student be able to perform on the assessment appropriately. So I think that's all I have, unless there's questions and comments in the chat. I see Mike Hippel's comment.
Yeah.
That he tells the families to do the training monthly, not quarterly. Yeah, some students may need it more often than others.
Yep.
And how often are we training staff? Right, staff might need the training to be reminded that,
Yep.
oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing this for this particular student. But yeah, thank you, Mike, for that comment.
And also when staff turns over, right? Just remembering, because I know it's busy in schools, right? You get going and you're just like that momentum carries you through the year. So remembering a staff turnover, especially, I think frequently a paraprofessional position might switch out mid-year more likely than a teacher position. And frequently those are people working directly with some of our students who are using certainly augmentative and alternative communication and other assistive technologies. So making sure they're trained quickly. When I was a director, we actually implemented onboarding procedures for our paraprofessionals because so many of those positions were turning over mid-year that we couldn't rely on the beginning of the year in-service time. We had to have some procedures in place to have them doing an orientation within their first week of work before beginning to work directly with students with less supervision. So that was helpful.